This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Professional liability can arise from the resources. It could be statute, unimportant for you really in P7, but if the auditor becomes a liquidator of a company, then the auditor or accountant, as would be then, is potentially liable for certain breaches. There is contract law, because the auditor, for example, will have sent a letter of engagement to the client saying what the auditor will do, but if that work is not carried out properly to the right standard, then there is potentially a contractual comeback. But by far the most important one that we have to consider is the tort of negligence, where the auditor has done an audit, perhaps says that the financial statements show a true and fair view, whereas in fact they don't, and certain people have relied on the financial statements and have in some way been financially damaged because of that reliance. For the tort of negligence, you have to show three things. First of all, that a duty of care exists. Now that automatically exists between an auditor and an audit client. It's the nature of the relationship, really. But for others, if we think of suppliers, if we think of lenders, then before this duty of care can exist, the accountant should be aware, should know that the injured party is going to rely on the accountant's work, the auditor's work. You have to look at proximity. Is the damage which has been caused to this person reasonably close, if you like, to the acts of the accountant? So, for example, if the lender relied on financial statements, say from 5 years ago, and the financial statements were incorrect, then it'd be very difficult to say there was a kind of, knock-on effect from 5 years ago, and that I lent money or you lent money now because of incorrect financial statements 5 years ago. They're too far apart. That was going apart in time. It can also be going apart in various other ways, through maybe hearsay going on through the financial system. And also that the misstatement, if it occurred, actually caused a different outcome. So a misstatement which doesn't induce anyone to change their behavior may be a misstatement, but it has essentially caused no problem, not being the cause of any financial loss. You have to show that the duty was breached, and part of showing that the duty was breached is judging how strict is the standard, how high is the standard. And by and large, if auditors comply with the international standards of auditing, they're going to be relatively safe, because the international standards of auditing tell the auditors how to do the audit. Here's what you should do here, here's what you do in the stock take. And if they comply with that, then in a way, who's going to say they should do something extra or different? And you have to show that the breach caused financial loss. The two leading cases are Caparo versus Dickman and RBS versus Bannerman. In Caparo versus Dickman, Caparo took over a target company, but then claimed that the price paid was too high because they had relied on financial statements which showed an inflated profit. The profit had been overstated, and therefore they paid too much. And here it was held that the auditors were not negligent. The auditors did not owe a duty of care to Caparo. Caparo had kind of come out of the blue, so to speak. No one had known they were about to make any sort of offer for the company. And there was simply no kind of proximity. There was no reason why the auditors therefore owed that duty of care. In RBS versus Bannerman, Bannerman was the auditor, RBS is the bank, Royal Bank of Scotland. RBS used the work that Bannerman had done to create the financial statements, and on the basis of financial information that had been signed off by Bannerman, RBS decided to make a loan. The difference here was that the accountants knew that RBS was going to rely on financial information which they had signed off. And here Bannerman was found guilty of negligence. Although the judge did say that if Bannerman had in its audit report put what's called an exclusion clause, saying, well, we're not liable to anybody else other than the members of the company, then they would have been found liable for negligence. Case law suggests, the cases we've looked at, is that reasonable care depends on facts. There is no absolute level of reasonable care, but, for example, whether or not you complied with the international standard of auditing would certainly be influential. It realizes also that auditing procedures and approaches improve. And this, in a way, is setting the bar higher and higher and higher. If auditing methodologies have improved, you should keep up to date with that, and you would be expected to apply the latest techniques, the best techniques to the audit. Auditors must have an inquiring mind, but they don't have to go in with suspicions of dishonesty. And this comes really back to what we've been saying about skepticism. Skepticism is having an inquiring mind, is following up errors and peculiarities that they see during the audit to see why that's happened, has it happened again, and so on. But they don't go in expecting fraud. They don't go in expecting people to tell them lies. They don't go in expecting the directors to have stolen cash, and so on. Courts have shown a reluctance to extend the duty of care beyond members. So lenders, suppliers, investors of other types and so on will generally speaking find it quite difficult to go after the auditors to get some sort of compensation. Disclaimers, as I said, could be effective, the Bannerman clause, but ACCA, for example, is a little bit ambivalent towards that. It's kind of saying if you put into your audit report that the members effectively to whom the audit report is addressed can rely on what we're saying, that the financial statements are true and fair, how can they be true and fair for the members, but of course not true and fair for bankers or for suppliers? It's the same set of financial statements, and it perhaps doesn't look great. It's perhaps undermining really the value of the audit report and devaluing really the worth of auditors and the work they do. Given here is an example of the kind of wording that you might find. It says we have a duty as auditors to report on the annual accounts or annual financial statements of the company. It says here it only extends to the members of the company. To members of a company as a whole, not to an individual shareholder or group of shareholders, and not to a third party. And we cannot be held responsible to any third party who uses or places reliance on our opinion in order to make a decision to enter into any type of transaction with the company. And it does kind of make you wonder, well, what's the point of publishing financial statements if the auditors are saying, well, they're there, but don't believe them, don't act on them, don't use them to make financial decisions. Methods of reducing liability. Auditors will always take out, and accountants in general, professional liability insurance, but professional indemnity insurance. This means that if the auditor is found guilty of negligence and has to pay damages to someone, that the insurance company will come in and pay all or most of that expense. There's also something called fidelity insurance. This is if a member of staff or indeed a partner carries out dishonesty. So when your member of staff is carrying out the audit, if a member of staff steals cash from the client, this will cover losses for that sort of act. Partnerships can incorporate. They can become limited liability partnerships. And this means that the partners are not liable to lose their personal wealth, their personal assets, although of course it may potentially bring down the company. You can become a limited company as well, instead of a limited liability partnership. And then there is sometimes called something called a limited liability agreement, where in the engagement letter, the auditor and the client set out the maximum amount of damages that will be paid. Also, nowadays, the auditors and the clients are trying to get into arrangements where any sort of liability is potentially shared between the auditor and the client. Because very often, if the auditor hasn't discovered something which is wrong, it's actually partly the client's fault. So the auditor doesn't discover a fraud, and it was quite a large fraud, and maybe they're not expected to, but somebody might have a go at them. Well, really, it's the client, the management, people responsible for governance, who should be responsible for stopping fraud, and to simply say it's all the auditor's fault for not discovering it is wrong. Even if there's a misstatement, it could be a misstatement about the valuation of inventory, and that's where management has much more expertise than the auditor. So we're becoming and looking at a kind of liability sharing arrangement, which again is going to reduce the liability which is experienced by the auditors.